Ugh, I just finished the last chapter of my draft and I'm realizing how much is still left to do. What do I do with that? Hello, I am Dr. Denise, and I'm the author of the book Write: How to Use the Right Method to Draft a Book in 100 Days. This is day 87 of a 100-day journey. I used to have such a hard time deciding when my draft was finished because there was always something else to do, and all of those loose threads meant that it wasn't finished. And in reality, it wasn't finished in that it wasn't ready to be published. It still had holes in the draft. There were still places where I had markers, places that I write notes to myself in all capital letters so that I'll remember to go back and add things to it. Well, some of those hadn't been addressed. I still had sections that I needed to write, things like the acknowledgments or the introduction or the author's bio, and they weren't in the draft yet. So, how could I possibly call it finished when there were still things to do? So many things. Actually, it wasn't really that much, but it felt like a lot because there were a lot of loose pieces. So this week, we're going to take a breath. We're going to address some of those sections, and we're going to find comfort in that place of calling the draft finished. You've got this. So if you remember from the last video, we are calling the draft finished when the last chapter is written. That may mean that not every word of the draft is written yet. That's okay. You still have time because you're going to edit the manuscript. So one thing that I find tremendously helpful is to gather all of those loose ends into some sort of a list. That way I know I'm not ever going to forget them, and I can go back and I can look at them and review what needs to be done without actually having to scroll through the entire document. So we're going to revisit that messy ideas list. I love this section of my draft. I've talked about it before. I find it incredibly helpful as just basically a notepad at the end of the document where I can dump all of my ideas. Well, that's how we've used the messy ideas list up to this point. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to clean it up a little bit, and we're actually going to list the things that still need to be addressed. Again, we're gathering those loose threads so they're not fraying out everywhere. Maybe you want to write a little intro blurb for sections 1, 2, and 3 of the book. Or maybe your book doesn't have those sections, but it does have a prologue that you need to write. Put that in the messy ideas list just to trigger your brain to say, I know this is something left that I need to do. This is going to serve as your actions list. It's your things left undone. So you won't forget them. You've got them, you've gathered them, and you're going to address them, but not until the next phase. What this does is it relieves your mind of having to kind of grasp those loose threads everywhere. Those wake up in the middle of the night with, oh yeah, I need to write that section. Oh no, I'm going to forget it. You don't have to worry about those things anymore because all those things are going to be collected in the messy ideas list. So as you come across them, you may feel the inclination to just address them and write those sections. If you do, ride that energy and go ahead and do that. But if you're not quite ready to write those sections, then again, just put them in your messy ideas list so they're all collected. Now, often I will finish the last chapter maybe at the beginning of the week, say on a Monday or a Tuesday. But I tend to like to plan my weeks as weeks. And so often there will be a few days afterwards in the week where I still have writing time, but I'm calling the draft done. I like to use those last few days as a time to clean up the draft like this. Now, if you remember from the last video, I also suggest that you do a read through. This is a really great time to gather everything that needs attention into that messy ideas list. So as you are rereading the document from the beginning and you come across those sections, simply go to the end of the document in that messy ideas list and jot yourself a note. Address stat on page 71. Refine character on page 48. Work on the intro to chapter 2. Since the page numbers may change as I'm editing, I like to go in and make myself a note actually in the draft that's in all capital letters that just reminds me this is the place where I want to make that change. And so by gathering up all these loose details into one place, what you are doing is you're giving your brain the gift of being able to let go of the manuscript as you move into the rest phase, which is what you're going to do after finishing the draft. It's that time that you take away so that you can come back to it with fresh eyes. But instead of spending the first week or two of that going, oh, I need to do this. Oh yeah, I wanted to remember to do that. You'll have all of that collected. And if any of those random ideas come to you during that time and they feel urgent, like you need to make sure you address them, just open your document and add them to your messy ideas list then. So now what happens is you have a rough draft, and it may be really rough. You have a list of things that still needs to be addressed, but it's all together and collected. And then you have the ability to take a break from your draft and come back to it renewed and excited again about this book that you're working on. And remember, this is the point that we transition from calling it a draft to calling it a manuscript, because a manuscript is something we're getting ready to publish. So that is what you do with all the undone things in your draft so that you can relax and truly believe that the draft is finished.